After I saw what was in front of me, he replied, "I had the exact same response," he stated with a chuckle. He started opening his notebook as he carried on. "That's the only thing we have on old Hector." He paused. "I want to show you this though." He turned his notebook around, allowing me to read it while he pointed at the important information on each page. He explained that due to the fact that all of the organs had been removed from each of the bodies and that most of the blood had been drained, they had trouble taking reliable toxic reports. However, they found trace amounts of caliber bean extract. Caliber beans are used in West African rituals as they paralyze the victim, leaving them alive but unable to move during the ritual. Due to the fact that it appears that the cause of death for each of these victims was a surgery to remove the organs, Rory believes that the victims were paralyzed by the caliber bean extract. Then they were forced to lay and watch as the killer cut them up. In addition to the bean extract, the only other notable finding inside the bodies was a very small amount of gold powder. I don't mean a powder with a golden color. I mean, there was a legitimate gold powder sprinkled inside of their body cavities before they were sewn up. Rory proceeded to remove the lockbox from the manila envelope. "If anybody knows I brought these, I'll get fired, so shh." He handed me the lockbox, and I slowly opened it. There were 50 to 60 photos. There were of the removal of the organs of Rosa Vallejos, Alex Bennett, and David Turner. Apparently, Rory felt it was in poor taste to show horrific photos of his friend's son, which I understood. The pure shock value of the photos was the blood, the stabbing into the flesh, the general creepiness of a Polaroid photo of a dead body. However, what truly shook me to my core was the fact that their eyes were wide open. They were watching him. You could tell. You could trace the eye line, and you could see it following the blades as they cut up the flesh. They visibly died at different points in the process. Rosa died as soon as he started pulling out her intestines. Rory and I agreed that we believe Alex Bennett's heart gave out quickly, rather than bleeding out, as he expired rather soon in the process. The most painful to look at were the photos of David. He seemed to pass away multiple times, but then his eyes would open, and he'd watch the next few incisions before his eyes would roll back, only for that process to repeat multiple times before he finally died as his first lung was removed. Following this, Detective Jones started to explain to me everything that they had gathered from going through all of his photos that they had found, as well as those that had been delivered. It appeared that the killer for the first stage simply follows in photographs, as though to learn a general routine. Then during the second stage, more and more photos were taken from inside of the house, most of the time during the night while the victim was sleeping. He also mentioned that there were photos that seemed to be taken of every single object in the victim's fridge, close-ups, shots from different angles. The lid would be removed and photos would be taken looking inside of it. Bizarre. Finally, in the third stage, there were photos of their unconscious bodies inside of their homes, followed by them being operated on, and in rooms so dimly lit that they were unable to discern anything about its whereabouts. After Rory had shown me all he had brought, he sat back in the couch, letting out a defeated sigh. "I assume you don't know anything I don't." He let out a soft chuckle, as though the notion itself was ridiculous. I shrugged. He inquired further, "Did you see anyone around Hector's place?" I shook my head. To be honest, I had almost never seen Hector as it was. He kept to himself. I don't think I ever even saw him in the laundry room for our little area of the complex. I would have continued trying to recall any possible memory of Hector Brown, but I was interrupted by Rory exclaiming, "The fuck?" I jumped, looking to him, then looking to where his gaze was fixed. What? I thought I saw a light. He rose to his feet to look out the window, squinting. A light? Yeah, like a flash, like a cam. In the middle of the word, he froze, as did I. A sudden flash of light illuminated the room through the window. Before we could even react, there was a loud bang on the door, like a hammer driving a nail into the wall. I desperately grabbed the steak knife from its resting place on the coffee table, while Rory rushed to his possessions, where he'd remove his holster and left his gun. Picking up the firearm and returning to my side, he held the barrel towards the door, and I slowly opened it with one hand, being sure to lean out the way, holding the knife in my free hand. As I swung the door open, I waited, closing my eyes, bracing for whatever might happen, but nothing happened. Rory leaned out into the doorframe, looking around and failing to see anything. He took a few steps out into the sidewalk and looked around before turning back and shrugging. He muttered, "I gotta call this in." As he started marching back towards my apartment, I looked around for a moment as he walked past me, and as I was about to follow him in, something on my door caught my gaze. There was a single Polaroid, nailed face down against my door. I tried to say, "Rory," but instead, a barely audible whisper left my lips. The nail was barely hammered into the door, hit just hard enough to hold the Polaroid in place. With a little tug, I removed the nail, and the photograph stayed attached. I slid the picture off of the nail and turned it around to take a look. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was looking at. It was a photograph of me, wearing a tacky Batman bathrobe over a ratty Colorado t-shirt, holding a steak knife in one hand and seemingly black Polaroid in the other. And as I was staring directly at the camera, a chill ran down my spine, and as if by instinct, I mimicked my posture in the photograph, looking the same direction. As soon as I raised my gaze, a bright flash of light momentarily obscured my vision. I heard footsteps running away, but the large spots I was seeing prevented me from catching any sort of glimpse of the man. I called out to Rory, but by the time he was at my side, it was too late. He radioed all of the nearby squad cars, and they came to help, but nothing could have been done. Whoever it was had already vanished. Rory called it in, and the police felt the appropriate course of action was to question me until I couldn't stand it anymore, which is exactly what they did. In the grimy, poor-lit questioning room, I couldn't help but break down. They were certain that I had something to do with all of this. They were treating me like a suspect, not a victim. I feared for my life, and I felt like no one was going to help me. Hell, I felt like no one would be able to. After I'd finished crying and panicking like a mess, they had sit me out in a sort of waiting room outside their interrogation cells. I overheard distant shouting. As I turned my head to try to find the source of commotion, I saw more and more people running down a certain hallway, which when I looked to the sign over the archway, led to the holding cells. While the herd of people was running away from me down the hallway, I recognized a single face heading the opposite direction. Heather Patterson. She exclaimed, "Dad! Dad!" as she strode down the hallway, before entering the large waiting area, before swinging open the door of the captain's office. The next words that left her mouth sent chills down my spine. "Hector's gone." "What?" I heard the deep voice booming from inside the office. "I don't know, he vanished, he's gone." "What the fuck? How?" His voice thundered as he exploded out of the doorway, marching down towards the holding cells. I couldn't understand what Heather was saying as they walked, as their anxiety had resulted in a frantic breakneck pace of speech. They disappeared down the hallway, and I was forced to sit, anxiously waiting outside the questioning cells. A few minutes passed, and I let my head lean back against the wall behind me. I allowed my eyelids to slowly close as I felt that resting my eyes for a moment might ease my anxiety. It would have, if not for the sudden flash of light. It wasn't so bright as to blind me, so much as it was a sudden flash of red as the light pierced through my eyelids. I jolted up, looking around in every possible direction. I saw nothing. I heard nothing. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I'm just losing it. I was sent home with an armed guard, a young cop fresh out of the academy named Joey. He drove me home in his squad car, and he assured me that his stockpile of Red Bulls would keep him awake through the entire night. To be completely honest, his constant reassuring made me more nervous that such a thing would happen, but that didn't matter. When we arrived at my apartment, the lantern-style light that typically illuminated my doorway was smashed. My windows were open, and the screens were pried out and left crumpled on the ground by the openings they left behind. The smell, I've never smelled something as awful as the smell that oozed out of my apartment. Joey pulled out his gun and held the walkie-talkie near his face with his free hand. "I need backup. I think it might be Hector." He released the radio and nodded to me as we began walking towards the door. I slid my key into the lock, but the sheer force of pushing the key in nudged the door open. It wasn't even latched. As soon as we entered, the smell increased tenfold. Nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. My living room wasn't any messier than usual. No drawers were open, no cabinets. I admit I live in a relatively shitty part of Denver, and as a result, I thought my apartment might have just been broken into. As soon as we entered my bedroom, those suspicions were put to rest. Laying on my bed, with his wrists and ankles tied to each of their own bedposts, was Hector Brown. Gutted, flayed open much like poor young Benjamin Lyle was. However, instead of photographs in his carving his chest cavity, there was a single Ziploc bag. Inside of that bag, a couple pieces of crumpled up college ruled paper covered in writing. I instinctively went to grab the bag, prompting a "No, don't" from Joey. It didn't stop me. I grabbed the bag and upon picking it up, revealed that Hector's heart was left inside of his torso as well. The most chilling thing, there was a bite mark. In response to my discovery, I couldn't help but vomit. I ran out of my doorstep and, well, you know. After a few minutes outside, I felt well enough to re-enter. When I did, Officer Joey was standing in the exact same place, staring, awestruck, at Hector's corpse. I picked up the Ziploc bag that I had dropped when I ran to unload. I opened the bag and uncrumpled the papers that were inside. On the pieces of paper, a note.